sort or another.
Okay. Did I say it's KAZU, Pacific Grove, radio with a choice? And this evening I have Chequeesh and
Chequeesh,
yeah. And, well, she has a program here on Mondays during the day. I thought it'd be nice to get two ladies here talking about their activities in the political field. How about that? Is there anything particular you want to say at this time that you have on your mind that expresses your feelings about a lot of the things coming down?
About a lot. Oh, the garbage is out and it's stinking to high heaven. And people know the truth inside of themselves. I really believe strongly enough for human beings that you know when something doesn't sound right.
But isn't it better to see them? To see them under oath talking about, to see the faces of evil don't have an armband and a swagger stick. It's better, I think, to just recognize them, as they are.
Mm-hmm.
The mysteries go on about who runs the country. They're just right out there saying it.
Well, this whole thing of Fritz Kramer keeps coming up over and over again, and always the Nazi connection everywhere you look.
Everywhere. Genocide,
and the Nazi connection, the Nazis' Holocaust was lifted right out of the annuals of not only the Trail of Tears, the extermination of the Indian people, but also right out of the Spanish Inquisition. And there are still comments being made from people within the church that are right out of the Inquisition. And if we let them, they'll do it to us again.
Well, Central America is right out of the Inquisition.
Yeah,
what we're doing down there, we've killed 1 million people in 20 years for, in quotes, democracy, with the approval and the plans, of the Vatican to do these things.
Right. It's interesting that there is a man, Franciscan priest named Noel Maholi, who co-authored the book Junipero Serra. And he's been trying to make a saint out of Junipero Serra for 30 years now. And it seems to me if the man had any real validity, it wouldn't have taken 200 years. And he has been quoted as saying to not only Mark Pensky of the LA Times, but also Paul Prentice of the Dallas Morning News, calling me a witch.
Yeah, well,
and his boy, Junipero Serra, brought the Spanish Inquisition to California and Mexico and was responsible for the death of women dying as he accused them. He said he saw them flying through the air and cavorting with demons in caves.
Well, women aren't popular in that church group anyway.
Yeah, no, they'd have no voice whatsoever, as a matter of fact, but they do the work.
Yeah.
I just found out that there are nuns in our community that are on SSI in order to survive, to have enough food to eat because they get so little support from the church that they serve.
Oh, really?
Yeah. How is that for an expose?
Oh, yeah, I read about the nuns getting older, and if they don't go along with everything, they're kicked around. If they complain, they're kicked out, and then they have no help at all.
People really need to start questioning those who are making these policies without consulting them. And I think this is the year of the turnaround. I would suggest if anyone had ever any intent of saying something or coming forth, that you do it this year.
Well, I feel like after I saw Albert Hakim on television with your hearings, I felt, well, unless I had a commitment for the rest of the year, because people have ordered broadcasts for up through 1987 and commitments with other people or stations, I would just stop now because I think I should write. I've seen all there is to see. I've seen the team. They're right there. I mean, Reagan, Bush, and Hakeem Secord North, the whole national security group, McFarland, they are the raw, they call themselves the Enterprise. There isn't any more to see. Now it's time to write about it.
It is a very poisonous spider's web, and I am so glad that there is a one. I wish there were more, Mae, but you are very, very special in the fact that you are able to compute all of these connections and all of these phony names and accounts and put them together. I mean, the greatest lawbreakers that we have are our lawmakers.
Well, the good Lord did one wonderful thing for me. He gave me a small team that keep appearing over and over again. And what if they were different names? Every time they add a name, like I didn't know Robert Owen, but the basic structure, the banker and all the places they fund, and like when Bruni comes in, I was studying Bruni and the fascism there, and then all of a sudden he works with Mark Rich, so he taps right into the network that I know. So the good Lord gave them just a team that is identifiable and consistent.
I have a child who has just discovered Vonnegut and Cat's Cradle, and talking about not only Ice Nine, but also members of the Caress or Caress. In this term, it's a real caress, and they keep playing the dance together.
Yeah,
out of our pocketbook.
Now, we'll take some calls. Here are two lady activists, right, in one room, 375-3082, Mae Brussell and Chequeesh. You might have seen her picture. There's a long article in the Herald this past week about her demonstrations at the time that the Pope... He comes on the 17th?
Yes, he does.
And both of us have been visited, probably you more than me, but I've only had one visit by the Secret Service. Do you see them frequently? Or did you just... How many times have you seen them?
Well, I've seen them 3 times now. Oh. One day we showed up in trench coats with dark glasses. One of the sisters...
So you've seen them once?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a call, and then we'll talk about our visits with the Secret Service.
All right.
Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, Mae Brussell?
Yes.
You almost were going to explain the nickname Billy Button.
Oh, yeah, you called and wanted me to explain.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, that's a hole right where your navel is that attaches your umbilical cord.
I know, I'm talking about...
I know what you mean. I mean, well, they said they gave him the name because it had something to do that they hinted was so not obscene considering who these people are. I mean, the belly button is the cleanest thing about them, but they all are passionately in love with Ollie, so I'll let you figure a little bit of this out. Mr. Conrad, who accompanied Carl Spitz Channel, to the White House to make the pitch for the money, that's his lover. There's a pair of them from Spitz Channel and Western Golds that live out in San Francisco. They found out with contributions to the Contras they bought a condo for around $50,000 or $60,000. And these men have these intense loves. You know, Hakeem said my chills go up and down my spine when I think of Allie, and I want to give him some money because he never sees his family. Well, maybe he's telling the wife, here, buy some trinkets, Ollie's mine, you know? They're not going to tell you, but these are all weirdos that you're looking on the screen. I shouldn't use that term, not weirdos. What I mean is these people are obscene in that they have their little in-jokes. They're not man enough to come out and say, well, this is my feelings or taste. You know, they make little jokes, which I think is bad, because that administration wants to hide what their feelings are, whatever they are, and they put down everybody who has feelings different than what you're supposed to have, the home, you know, the apple pie and the fence and the man and wife and 2 children and the marriage ceremony, and everybody else is an outcast. And going on in their offices are these great admirations and loves and tokens of gratitude and names like Belly Button. So, Ollie North says, well, the president, nothing can happen to me. The president loves my ass. You know, this is what he says on television. You know, what's the ass? You know? I mean, these people, I don't know. I don't think they're figures of speech because they actually get on with a starry-eyed adoration for this particular person and giving these gifts to Belly Button.
Well, I recently write an article about these guys being homosexuals because...
there have been quite a few articles, and in the tone that they've come out, I'll bring them in next week, they're mentioning the hypocrisy of the Reagan administration, and in addition to the hypocrisy, Mr. Terry Dolan died of AIDS, and there was a long article in the Washington Post, and he was the leader for the fundraising for the Republican Party. He's the second one. Well, several have died of AIDS, but a biggie among that group. But they have little silly names, like, I don't even think the investigator should say, well, here is an account for, say, Oliver North of $200,000. It has the initials BB. I don't think people should sit in the room and laugh, these grown people, about Belly Button. Not that I'm a prude, but these people are such hypocrites.
Yeah.
What do you think about Chequeesh these?
Well, all of a sudden, this is starting to remind me of an article that I'm not sure if it was in Saturday's Herald, but it was in a newspaper in the last 4 days. It talks about the Skull and Crossbones, which is a college university club that many people, the Trilateral Commission, Orville Harriman, all kinds of leaders of bankers and so forth, they take the top leaders, people who show leadership abilities from Brown, Harvard, Yale, some of those other top...
No, it's only at Yale. Chequeesh, when I met you, and you forgot this, and when I met you, I said, if you are interested in Indian affairs, you should go into the Skull and Crossbones at Yale, because George Bush, in order to be initiated, and that was the articles in our paper this week,
blindfolded and naked.
He dug up Geronimo, the Indian. They have to produce a skull. They have to dig a grave and produce a skull, and he has Geronimo's head in the basement of the club at Yale, in which he's trying to run for vice president right now. But you probably forgot I told you, and I think if you look at the sheets I gave you, I talked about this man being the vice president who lies in a casket naked and then arises from the dead.
That's right.
Remember that?
Yep, and they all have funny nicknames. And one of the things of their initiation is that they're naked and blindfolded, these future leaders of America who are right now all the big names in the administration.
William Buckley.
And
Henry
they have
Luce.
to reveal all of their hidden things about their sexuality, about personal things in their life, right down to the last secret. And frankly, I think that's one of the ways that they hold them.
That's right. And so, Buckley, and Luce and Harriman, and one of the Supreme Court justices. It was in our Monterey Herald this past weekend, and I was going to bring it up because my listeners know that I've talked about the Skull and Crossbones, and it's very important. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Amanda.
Can you talk a little louder?
This is Amanda.
Amanda? Who do you want?
It's Chequeesh.
Chequeesh, that's Amanda.
Who's Amanda? Hello, Amanda. Who's this?
Swan Eagle's daughter.
Who?
Swan Eagle's daughter.
Yes, sweetheart. How are you calling us on Mae Brussell's program now?
I heard the program this morning.
Okay. Thank you very much, honey.
Okay,
say hello to your mother.
Okay. 375-3082.
Well, we have something for every age group.
Every age group. Well, she better not hear about the Skull and Crossbones. No, when you talk about the perversion.
How childish, over and over again. The little boys' clubs and the Bohemian with their cremation of care.
Yeah, and see, Prescott Bush is a Knight of Malta, and William Buckley's a Knight of Malta. There's a lot of Knights of Malta that are in Skull and Crossbones. Hello, you're on the air.
Well, hello, ladies. Nice to have you both on today.
Thanks.
I'd like to hear as you get on later about your visits to of the
Secret Service.
Secret Service, yeah. Another activist here who has some information to share both with you and with anybody listening. Since we're talking about women today, Marge Piercy has a new novel out, which I would recommend to anybody interested in this subject. And particularly a good one for people who are just starting to get interested and starting to realize what's going on and wanting to find out more and understand how it happens. It's called Gone to Soldiers. It's a big, long novel, and it's very, very good. And it focuses on, it's during the time of the Second World War, and it focuses on both what's going on in Europe and in the South Pacific and the United States.
Yeah.
And
do you have any questions, or you just want to talk about
I wanted to read a very, very short little piece here that'll give you an idea of the quality of this thing. And it has to do with the Nazi.
But how long is the piece?
It's extremely short. It's a very short account of a dream, and please let me. You will be happy if you let me tell it to you. It has to do with the Nazi trip and how it started. She's telling a dream to somebody. And she says, the American colonel I was with, he was tall and blonde and Midwestern and naive. We kept pursuing an SS officer. There were chase scenes in and out of ruins. Finally, we had him cornered. Then the SS turned into a real wolf, and he leaped through the air. And as his teeth sank into the American colonel's throat, he disappeared into him. What happened to the Nazi? I asked the colonel. What Nazi? The colonel just stared at me. There is no Nazi here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gone to Soldiers. It's in the library by Marge Piercy.
Okay.
That's quite descriptive.
Do you have time to read novels?
No.
I don't either. I read fiction. I'm nonfiction. There's nothing that I can read. There's no script that equals the stuff that I read. And it's so real, and you can quote it and say, look at this, so that what's their dreams are our nightmares. You know, I appreciate the call, but anybody who wants to read it can read the book. But
well, I think that if anyone really is interested in fiction, they should read the Pentagon Papers, and also, well, the true report certainly is not fiction, but all the stuff that we were led to believe all those years we were pumping, young men and young women's lives and money into that obscene
and drugs
war.
Again, the same
and
people.
Drugs again,
and Cardinal Spellman,
and it continues on. And if you watch all this stuff that's going on TV, it's perfect that they have a bunch of actors and that they're considering another. Because it's all fiction.
It's all fiction. There's a book out, The Cardinals' Wars, or I forget the title of it. I have it at home. It's about Cardinal Spellman, the Vietnam War. Again, the church. Again,
what was his involvement with that?
Oh, he ran that whole war. He was very,
for what purpose, Mae?
Well, a large population of Vietnam is Catholic.
Yes.
And to get the Buddhists out, and also the Vatican was big into drug traffic with the French before them, and the narcotics that came out of Southeast Asia. And when you control those, you can build big empires for the church, and then get your brethren on their knees buying your beads. Oh, I don't mean to be so cynical,
no,
but
it goes on and on.
It's really William Donovan of the OSS and William Casey of the OSS. We're behind, the Vietnam War and the intelligence community. And Henry
I
Luce.
have clear documentation from a researcher named John Anderson of the Kamayakan Research that shows that the missions, one of their reasons for being built was so that they could be used to smuggle gold and silver under what is called a direct duplicity against the monarchy of Spain. In other words, the monarchy of Spain footed their coming out here, and then they had Indians here in California that they enslaved, put into the mines of gold and silver, and then smuggled them secretly out from mission to mission.
Isn't that terrible?
Back to the church they went. Back to the church.
It's terrible. Hello, you're on the air.
Oh, hello, Mae.
Yeah.
In Chequeesh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things here. Have you got the book, either one of you seen the book or got the book Inside the League by Scott Anderson and John Lee?
Yeah, do you know that book?
It's very fascinating.
That came out about 6 or 8 months ago, but there was a book review of it this weekend. It was either the Chronicle or the Herald.
It was the Chronicle. I'm looking at it right now, and I got a picture of General Singlab staring out at me with his fiendish Nazi vistage.
It's about John Singlab, who was inside the League. It's the World Anti-Communist League, and Singlab is the man who went to Taiwan and South Korea, and Brunei, hitting for the money from the great democracies, and he works with all the Nazis from World War II and the fascists. In the book review in the Chronicle yesterday, I have the book. It makes clear the whole team around Central America and South America and Southeast Asia. It goes in the Moon connections, the Vatican connections, and the fascists, who really are getting a stranglehold on every country. And John Singlab is the president of the World Anti-Communist League, and incidentally, Representative McClure on the House, the Senate and House Iran investigation is a member of the World Anti-Communist League, and he's hearing these people who work with World Anti-Communist League. And he's so, you can see why the Aryan nation moved up to Idaho. They have the perfect representative. Yeah, you like that review? Did you read the book?
I haven't read the book, but the review really tells about the book, and I like the way the review comes out and says, the book is right, it's all true, go get it. It is the tone of the review, which is beautiful. So all the world watchers out there, I hope they run out and get that.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Also, I want to specify and hone down to a fine point something Chequeesh said when she first started speaking, and is that, to make it clear, Adolf Hitler himself in his writing says, I got the main part of my idea of genocide from how the Americans genocided the American Indians.
Yeah,
that is a direct quote of Adolf Hitler.
One more time.
Infield wrote about
one more time.
Okay, you want me to say that over one more time? Okay.
Where is it coming from?
Okay, it's in his. I don't know if it was in Mein Kampf or not, but it's in It's a documented statement Hitler made in the late 20s or early 30s, or during the 30s.
It was reprinted in
because Hitler was very fascinated by the American push west and how the white man displaced the Indians, whom they considered inferior. Hitler became very fascinated by that as a little boy when he was studying, and just reading as a little boy about the cowboys and Indians. Hitler became very fascinated by this, even while it was going on as a little boy when the reports would come into Germany. He was a little boy during the time of the Wounded Knee, and after that around 19, and then on into 1900.
Yes, I had heard from several sources, but I didn't know where the root was, that Hitler had actually sent several of his intelligence people over to study the reservation system and to study how they went about exterminating Indian people. And it's still going on, in northeastern Arizona.
The Nazis that were absorbed by this country, is that metaphorical illustration so succinctly put it that woman read. They still want to genocide the American Indians. And as Mae Brussell was talking about that big coal leasing thing in the Four Corners region, that publicity got out and stopped, but they were going to come in and they were just going to start shooting them and massacre them again.
Big Mountain. Right now there's 15,000 people that are being forcibly removed to what is just like the gas chambers of Auschwitz and Baden-Baden. And what it is the site... That's right. The site of the greatest uranium spill and contamination is the Rio Puerco.
Sure, the people like the Mark Riches get it. Yeah, the monopoly.
And there's 15,000 Navajo people on their way to be planted in that uranium spill. Already there are Navajo people that have taken up residence there, that have been moved there by the BIA and the Secretary of the Interior, and they're having babies with mutations and birth defects, and a lot of people are dying, and it is from uranium contamination, and it's happening here. Only instead of shower heads with gas coming out, we've got contaminated soil and water from the dear uranium.
The Nazis have learned over the years to do things. You do it more subtly, you do it slowlier, and you can get away with it.
Yes, very sophisticated. Well, we taught the Nazis, and the Nazis have taught us back again.
The Nazis are us. They're not over there.
Yeah, that's right.
We, as you see, we've reabsorbed and absorbed back and forth, but the two main ones is that Hitler learned from what we did to the American Indians, and then, of course, we absorbed the Nazism into the Republican Party, which was hijacked by the Nazis. In the 20s, it started then, because Hitler and the Nazis were a splinter group off the Communist Party that took over Germany in 1919 and 1920. They split off of that, and it grew from there. That was the surface explanation. It goes deeper than that. There's a lot more to it.
Now that we understand the people, no matter where you come from, whether it's you or me or Chequeesh, we all end up with the same framework. Now that we recognize it, now that we see it on the telly, we hear them under sworn testimony, their mentalities, and we saw it at Watergate. There's Robert Martin, used to be down the basement of the archives, watching Nazi pictures with G. Gordon Liddy, and his attorney, a Mr. Green, who helped him in that case, is the attorney for General Secord right now. So what do we do? It's a good question, but once you see it, how can we as individuals reach a larger amount of people to see what we're seeing or to feel something about this situation? That's the mystery now, is by the time it becomes visible, people are desensitized by just surviving with sicknesses and various feelings of supporting themselves and economic problems. And
that's part of the plan, is to emotionally exhaust people so that they can come in and say, okay, we'll give you peace, just do what we say.
Yeah, so now that the answers are into the questions of who's doing it, we're actually stymied by the lack of energy, or otherwise known as lethargy, of the people who years ago might have responded.
I want to warn World Watchers listeners, there's a new technique that they're using to label people that they want to get rid of, whom they don't like, and it's called, if you were hyperactive or had behavioral problems of any kind as a child, or you exhibit the effects of that now, they call that, as an adult, attention deficit syndrome. And the Nazis are using that to label people for push shoving aside or extermination or just discrediting you. They'll use that label attention deficit, and what it is, he had behavioral problems as a child, or was too active or something, and now that he's an adult, and if we don't like him, we can say, he has a short fuse because he's outraged at things. And so we can label him and stomp him down. And the psychiatric technocracy, which has been hijacked and created by the Nazis since World War II, and psychologists have been definitely on the forefront of using this, just like they did in Nazi Germany in the 20s and 30s when they exterminated the mentally ill first and then the mentally retarded right around the same time. Remember, they started there first.
Let's take some other calls. I appreciate your call.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Mae and Chequeesh, for letting me talk. I love you too very much.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
There's a wonderful quote. I wish that I'd brought it with me. It was from a German during the Nazi time, and he said something about when the Nazis came, they came for the trade unionists, and I said nothing, for I wasn't a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I said nothing because I wasn't a Jew. And then they came for the homosexuals, and I said nothing because I wasn't a homosexual. And then he goes down the list, and he said, and one day they came for me. And there was no one left to say anything.
That's right.
He said, I did not speak up.
That's right. You brought some interesting articles. What do you want to share now? This is Mae and Chequeesh, 375-3082. If you'd like to call in and talk about some of these problems. Chequeesh has an article. Should we take one more call and then take one quick call, and then we'll go to what you have right there. Hello, you're on the air.
Yes, that quote that Chequeesh just gave, that was from Pastor Martin Niemöller, who, since I gave it to you, Chequeesh, I found out something about him very interesting.
Tell me.
He was a member of the Freikorps.
I know that he did work earlier with the early Hitler Youth, yes.
Yes, and then he was a submarine captain during the war. And this statement, I gather, was made towards the end of the war or after the war.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Did they ever come for him?
I think he was killed, and then it turned out that he actually... Well, maybe that's what he meant by the pathos. He had been one of them.
Could have been.
And he was expressing his feelings, because then when he went, What do you have there now?
Nothing. They keep talking about the Nazis and about certain conditions within the church and unholy alliances during World War II of the church and the Nazi people. And here on today's Herald on Monday, June 8th, on page 3, I would like people to just look at that picture.
The Klan rally?
Yeah, and just, what do you see in that picture?
Oh, it's look at it in large numbers, too. Hello, you're on the air.
Hi, I'm just trying to find out, are you aired on the East Coast? I have a friend here that's from the East Coast.
You have a friend from the East Coast. Well, no, but he can subscribe to the tapes and put them on a radio station if he wants. The only commitment is that he has to, with the tapes that you subscribe, you get the printed sheet with a bibliography. So if you duplicate them for people, then you include the sheet so they have the sources of information. Otherwise, it's too much information out there if they don't have a bibliography sheet.
Right. So what address?
Mae Brussell, M-A-E.
M-A-E.
Brussell, B-R-U-S-S-E-L-L, P.O. Box 22511, Carmel 93922.
93922.
I got a call from Ontario, Canada this week, and this man was just wonderful, and he listens every week. And I get a lot of mail and articles from Canada. Anything I can do or send to you, and it's really neat. They're opening another one in Quebec. There's going to be a World Watchers in Quebec, and there's one in Ontario. So now I'll have to see what happens in Montreal.
Great.
Okay, thanks a lot for calling.
Thanks.
Okay, now did you have some other comments? Yes.
Oh, well, just the whole business about government and about the raping of the land and the stealing of people's constitutional rights and where our taxes are being sent. I got a letter here from Big Mountain, and one of the women who started the Big Mountain resistance movement is Pauline Weitzinger, who's had both of her legs removed now because of a diabetic condition. So she's really a a gentle being in one way and someone very strong, very courageous, and of impeccable spirit in another. She is a traditional. She's in her 70s. She lives in a hogan out in the middle of nowhere, out at Big Mountain. She's trying to herd her sheep. She's trying to take care of her family. And one night in February, this letter has arrived, there were 6 of these multi-million-dollar helicopters, the silent ones, they have a special name. Yeah. The ones that hover with no sound. For the entire night, there were 6 of them that were hovering over Pauline's hogan. And I wonder how many millions of dollars that cost us. And I'm trying to raise a family.
Yeah.
Things like that over and over and over again.
Well, if they see the metals in the ground, they use instruments to detect from way up in the satellites and down close by. And if she's sitting under some valuable property, they move you out, and then 10 years later they say, oh, look and behold, with some gold here, some silver. I mean, imagine, say, if Mark Rich is buying up this one guy who works with our government, with Bruni and all these various people like Henry Kissinger. To buy all the aluminum and bauxite of the world means that some poor native populations could earn a living other than slave labor and sell it to put back into their own countries. But he's buying this from all over the third world and depriving them of their natural resources.
Yes, over and over
again. There was one country where he bought 100% of their minerals for a thing like 30 years.
Incredible. And who signs over those papers? Incredible. And who signs over those papers? It's the tribal councils all over the world.
Yeah, who signs over?
Put someone in office so they can sign over the rights of the people.
And that's the signature, Hello, you're on the air.
Hi. I just wanted to let Chequeesh know that Pauline hasn't had her legs removed. It's another elder that I'm taking care of who lives in Santa Cruz who's had her legs removed. Pauline still has her legs.
I see. I'm reading one of your letters here. I take it this is Swan Eagle.
And I was kind of just writing, doing, free association, and I'm afraid maybe it wasn't clear that I was letting you know that I'm taking care of an elder here who's had her legs removed.
Oh, I see. Yes, because I'm looking at your letter right now, and it was, it doesn't matter. I'm glad that she has her legs. We certainly need every part of her to continue the fight.
Well, I think it's very, the sense of urgency that exists in her life is that extreme.
Yeah. Now, you were there on the reservation, and could you talk about some of the nature that the harassment is taking? I believe it has something to do with sheep. Now, this is all our tax dollars, folks. And please mention the sheep and the sonic booms and the helicopters, just what you personally firsthand saw.
Well, she asked to have a peace camp on her land because she wanted to have first-hand witnesses to the harassment, because often the people are not believed because so many of them who see it directly don't speak English.
Right, and we're talking about Big Mountain and the uranium, coal, and oil that's there underneath the traditional Navajo people, right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you be real specific, because we're covering so many subjects? I'm really going to have to ask you to just talk about that if you can.
When I was herding sheep, I saw jet fighter planes fly so low they were at eye level.
Oh.
And one time, Pauline and I and my daughter were in the hogan eating breakfast, and we heard a terrible loud noise, and quick she called me out, and the fighter jet flew so low over a hogan you could see the decals. And as soon as it passed, the coyotes began to howl. And each day she'd walk out all over the land and would see tracks from four-wheel drive vehicles that searched the land looking for livestock. And because of the stress of the situation...
And what would they do when they found livestock?
They would impound them.
And what is this livestock to Navajo people?
They need the wool to weave the rugs. The mutton is used in ceremonies and to feed the people. There's been a 90% livestock reduction causing starvation. Pauline, I wrote and asked her if she could send a rug so we could sell it direct and get the money to her. She told me, I don't even have time to weave anymore. And then shortly after that, like within the past couple of weeks, her sheep were sprayed by the silent helicopters, leaving a very strange residue on their fur. And then the DIA came in and took most of them. And when I was herding sheep for her and staying with her last spring, they were dying from a poison weed. and it's like torture of her animals rather than torturing her directly. That her life
they're doing it all around her.
Tormented.
Oh,
Well, it's incredible when you realize that this government is waging war all over the earth with billions and billions of dollars, and they have declared war on Indian people.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening, and it's ongoing. And there's also a whole thing happening in Santa Barbara now by the oil companies, which I'll get into.
Well, on television there was a movie just last week about the Indians being harassed near Las Vegas, the airplanes low flying and China falling off the covers, the native populations just really being chased out. I often wonder, there's so much interest like in El Salvador and Guatemala, Nicaragua, which there should be, but maybe America should clean up America and turn itself in and take care of the American Indian first.
Well, something that connects American Indians in El Salvador is Pino Air Park in Marana, Arizona. Evergreen Air Park is responsible for this place. They send helicopters that fly over El Salvador. We feel strongly that the helicopters that harass the people at Big Mountain come from the same place.
Are you getting Evergreen, the airplanes up there?
I don't know about the airplanes, but the helicopters are very similar to what they use in El Salvador and also on the Border Patrol. And this Pino Air Park trains the Border Patrol, BIA law enforcement officials, and is a site for the CIA. And so what I keep trying to search for is areas of military zones that show the connections between what's going on in Central America, South Africa, the border, and to American Indian people.
Of course, look at America. The melathion that was sprayed on us at the time of that Medfly incident, which I didn't believe for a minute, came out of the Evergreen Airlines and the CIA when they just came back in the backyards up in Silicon Valley and just sprayed.
Evergreen Airlines was also at the
It was right by the CIA, the one that did the spraying, And I just read in the Miami Herald that they want to spray them for the Medfly, and they're stopping it because it's ecologically dangerous. So in a few years from now...
It's interesting that here in California, they seem to be finding the Medfly in the areas that house perhaps the best bunch of anarchists, like Berkeley, San Lorenzo Valley. So go after the Medflies there.
And prove they didn't fall. Thanks a lot for calling.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that there would be how influential are you, and are you working with people to call attention to Americans who are doing a good job overseas, but really we should all, in some collective thing, adopt maybe a certain Indian community and become knowledgeable? Is there a way to do that, to break down?
Oh, I could definitely suggest one.
Yeah.
I would say the whole thing that is happening right now at Big Mountain is emblematic of all that's going on
the
all over the
corporate
world.
greed, and also
adopt the Navajo.
Adopt the Navajo, although you're on the air.
Hi, Mae.
Hi. Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
She went to Australia.
Yeah. Listen, just your last topic reminded me of when they did that spraying in remember Ray Taliaferro did that big investigation, and he discovered that malathion was only one thing that was being sprayed. There was a total of 10 different things that were being sprayed on the people.
And that was to get Jerry Brown out so we could have the great Senator Pete Wilson, the statesman of the ages, right? Who wants to mess around now with our big Surcoast?
Really? Yeah. Well, and I'm also thinking about how many vicious things happened in the name of religion over the ages.
There was an article in the paper this last week, I think, with a map of all the wars that were caused by religions.
Oh,
what are you reflecting on right now? I'm interested in what comes to your mind.
Are you speaking to me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm reflecting on some of the things you've been saying, about Father Sierra, and I didn't realize of course I wasn't politically active for a long time, but I didn't realize that the Indians were treated so badly by these for these priests.
You know, what I really call out is for people to just look at common sense. The most damaging amounts of documentation against Junipero Serra are owned by the Vatican themselves now. And they are cloistered within all of those floors upon floors upon floors underneath the Vatican, where most of the real history of this earth and our civilizations lie. You know, the unholy Roman Empire was the one that went to Britain, to the New World. Everywhere it went, it confiscated, it burned down, it took over, and it rebuilt. It built its own temples on those of the people before it. And it's all his story. All this history is written by the conquerors. And there is even, we have documentation about where all this information is being held. However, we have enough to really make people question very badly in this time of conquest, exploitation of resources, using indigenous people with slave labor, and just general genocide. Junipero Serra is a perfect model. So what is the church? What statement are they trying to make?
What's that quotation that he did whip them a little bit, but not as hard? I read one of the quotations. What's the one?
It was by...
you want to shape them up or get them to think his way?
Don DeNeve, who I debated before the Carmel ACLU in February, he admitted at the end it was just astonishing. And of course it immediately got covered up that, well, yes, Junipero Serra allowed flogging and beatings, but it was never for more than 2 minutes or 20 strokes, when you can take someone down to their bones. And also Father Serra, in his own letters, absolutely idolized St. Francis of Solano, who was a priest in Peru a little while before Junipero Serra came. And this man was called time and time again. He even got criticized by the Vatican itself for the tremendous amount of flogging and physical torture that the Indian people were put through. And it's just, I have a question to pose to people. Now, I have a letter from Junipero Serra that says that he personally witnessed against 2 women, and because he says that he saw them flying through the air and flying into caves where they cavorted and did unseemly things with demons. Now that leaves us with, as far as I can see, only 2 alternatives concerning this man. He was either crazy and hallucinating the most ugly, dastardous things, what was in this man's mind to see such things, or he was lying. And if he was lying, then he was directly involved with the murder of many, many women.
Or he thinks he knew it.
He knew it. Way he doesn't come out good.
No, he doesn't. And, you know, the church constantly says, show us proof. Well, I have, and they ignore it. And they keep saying, show us proof that Junipero Serra actually did this himself. Well, show me the proof where Adolf Hitler was seen or photographed actually pushing a button at Auschwitz that gassed the Jews. Right. He created and architected and maintained the system precisely as Junipero Serra
This is
did.
where the National Security Council got it from. You say, the president saying arms to raise, says, give me the proof. And they haven't yet admitted that they traded arms for hostages or killed John Kennedy. You say, well, give me the proof. And you show them 20 things. They say, no, that's just circumstantial. And they want a proof, but they refuse to identify a proof.
Well, I remember the day that I was accosted by one of the bishops there at Carmel Mission in August of '85, when I stood up and spoke in front of 1,200 people that were there sitting in silence. You would have thought that they were in agreement with celebrating the 200th anniversary of the death of Junipero Serra. I think it's interesting that they celebrate the death and not the birth. I too would celebrate that.
That's a good celebration.
Yeah. Well, afterwards, I was accosted by this very what do you call it, elitist-looking priest who said, where is your authority? Show me your authority. And I said, I'm an Indian woman. He said, you have no authority. I thought that was marvelous. He said, show me your documentation. And I said, our people have maintained thousands and thousands of years of oral history, which is absolutely clear and perfect. He said, that is no proof.
Well, if it's no
that's
proof,
no documentation.
if it's no proof, his Bible came that the Hebrews wrote 2,000 years before.
You know,
if that's no proof, then
who has proof anyway? I mean, any religion.
Well, it's common sense, don't you see? A handful of priests and a couple of legions of military. There's an unholy alliance right there. You know, you are who you keep company with. And they came here, and you know, one of the spiritual leaders of our tribe, Kotlota, said, you know, I remember the stories being told when the Spaniards first came. We had the land, and they arrived with the Bible, and they said, brothers, bow. Of course, they never said sisters because they didn't recognize the women at all, and it was a matriarchal society. But they said, brothers, let us bow our heads and pray. Close your eyes. So we closed our eyes. We bowed our heads, and when we looked up, we had the Bible and they had the land. And how did they manage to get it? How did they manage to feed the armies and the priests and send money back? They enslaved the Indians. And they say, oh no, these Indians were baptized and they loved it. There's another letter I have from Junipero Serra's own words where he asks Philip de Neve, the then governor of Monterey, to go after this man who has, Indian man, who was very respected by the people and has been renamed by the priest Balthazar. And he says, go out and hunt this man down, put him in chains and beat him, because we want to use him as an example to any of the other dissidents and malcontents.
You know, it doesn't change much to 1987 in El Salvador. In Nicaragua, the same thinking, the same behavior is going. At what point do people get enlightened and stop that kind of thing? When does it happen?
Well, I thank the Pope and I thank Noel Maholi for bringing up the absurdity of canonizing such a model as Junipero Serra, because I'll tell you what, this shows that it is continuing to go on. That's why we really need to speak out about Junipero Serra, because it's like holding up Hitler in a time when women and children and third world people are begging for some kind of honor and respect and survival. It's like deciding that that is the time to take Hitler and show him up as a model for us all.
And they get away with it. The strength terrorizes other people. Thanks for calling.
Isn't this the first time that in our history that we've had diplomatic relations with the Vatican?
Well, if we have an ambassador, that is the first time in about 125 years, I think. And the first one that Ronald Reagan had, of course, was William Wilson, and that's his personal financier that handled his accumulated fortune from nothing to millions, and was sent to Rome. And now he has Frank Shakespeare, who was head of the U.S. Information Agency, and so he's got a good top American spy in the Vatican. And so the relationships are really another way of scratching each other's spy back.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, thanks. Bye-bye.
I know in the San Francisco Chronicle, I believe it was in the Sunday section, I cut out the little article. I wish I had brought it. And from one of the monsignors within the Vatican itself, he says that the Vatican has cash assets in property and buildings and so forth of $560 million.
Oh, I know.
And they were telling us that we needed to pay here for the honor of that visit because they were near bankruptcy.
Well,
that's not counting the Michelangelos and the Da Vinci's.
Oh, well, they're not going to sell
that.
those, though.
People are hungry.
No, you're on the air.
People.
Hello, May. You and your guests were saying that they thought that Junipero Serra could be possibly lying or mistaken.
Which is it?
I opted for the idea that maybe he was purposely lying. I have a quote here from a book by Giraldus Cambrensis. He was part of the Anglo-Norman invasion force. He was a chaplain for it, I guess. He was part of it anyways, of Ireland by the Anglo-Norman invasion, which was instigated by Nicholas Breakspere, the only Englishman to be Pope. And it was under the book was called The Topography of Ireland, and this is an example of the type of lying that their personnel would do. It's under the title, A Man That Was Half an Ox and an Ox That Was Half a Man. In the neighborhood of Wicklow at the time time when Maurice Fitzgerald got possession of that country and the castle, an extraordinary man was seen, if indeed it be right to call him a man. He had all the parts of the human body except the extremities were those of an ox. From the joinings of the hand with the arms and the feet with the legs, he had hooves the same as an ox. He had no hair in his head, but was disfigured with baldness, both in front and behind. Here and there he had a little down instead of hair. His eyes were huge and were like those of an ox in color and being round. His face was flat as far as his mouth. Instead of a nose, he had two holes to act as nostrils, but no protuberance. He could not speak at all. He could only low. He attended the court of Maurice for a long time. He came to dinner every day, and using his cleft hooves as hands, he placed in his mouth whatever was given him to eat. The natives of the place, anyways, it goes on.
Who wrote this? What's this about?
It's called The Topography of Ireland. He was part of the Anglo-Norman invasion force. After the Normans took over England, which was probably Roman-backed, they invaded Ireland, 70 years later. And then after they waylaid, the Celtic Church and, the upper ranks in Ireland, they wrote these type of fraudulent diatribes to, justify their excesses.
Yeah.
And so he admitted in the book that he was incapable of lying. He was expected to get rewarded by Henry II, and he didn't. And he said that it was his fate to be unrewarded by princes that didn't appreciate him or something.
Yeah.
And he said he was never given to tell him the truth or something.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of these people in the Catholic Church know what they're doing. I think in Mexico there was a lot of evidence of a religion very similar to the Catholic Church, and there was very heavy censoring of information on Mexico for at least 100 years, and had to go through.
There still is.
Pardon me?
There still is censoring of what goes on in Mexico.
Yeah.
We're totally ignorant of the amount of poverty and the circumstances there.
Yeah, well, I think that they knew that there was, I think it was Father Acosta said that the devil had brought a false religion to Mexico, and that accounted for the the similarity. There was baptism and cross and quite a few other things that were similar to the Catholic Church.
Yeah, thank you for calling.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, in the mission, Dolores Mission in San Francisco, there is a large mural that is quite old, and it has the symbol over the cross over 3 panels. One is one of the Spain, and it says riches, and over the church it says God, and over the Indian panel it says death, and that's what's there.
Oh, my. It's so bad. I keep groaning. I can't. It gets bad. Hello?
Hi, Meg.
You're on the air.
Hi. How do you pronounce your guest's name?
Chequeesh? Is that pronounced right?
Chequeesh.
I'd like to ask Chequeesh a question, if I may.
Yeah. Okay.
I've read a little bit about the Indian religious beliefs, and especially the Hopi, and in particular concerning the Hopis, the idea that there was a tablet, and that the tablet has been handed down over the years, and it is somehow a prophetic instrument.
Yes, it's connected with Oribe on Third Mesa.
And if you would please elaborate on that story, I would appreciate it. And I'll listen to you on the air.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
Well, let's see. From what I understand from the now deceased Kikmovi, or the last hereditary chief of the Hopi, who was Mina Langsa in Oraibi. Now, Oraibi is interesting because it has been continuously inhabited for a minimum of 3,000 years. It's the oldest continuously inhabited community in the Western Hemisphere. And it has to do with a set of tablets that were brought by the Hopi people to this place. And there are certain families within the Hopi communities who hold them now. And yes, it has to do with a time of purification and chaos. The Hopi people say that we are now in a time of chaos, and that we are Koyaanisqatsi, a world out of balance, and that this imbalance and this separation of mind and heart is going to bring about a purification. It can happen in two ways. If things are left the way that they are and people do not grow up and become responsible and aware, Hopi people say there are three things that you must do to become this way. You keep your eyes open, or you are aware. Ask permission, and then the rest is up to you. The responsibility is yours. If we take it, this will be a spiritual purification, and people will reach a place of critical consciousness, and a mass will be reached. If we do not, and turn around, and if we do not mend the sacred hoop by seeing all colors, all people of four directions as being sacred and needing to be listened to, so we can piece together back the hoop and have the whole truth instead of our fragmented parts that we keep arguing and fighting about. If we continue to argue and fight and do not listen and realize that we are one whole, then there will be a great gourd of ashes and a destruction of the people.
Which is happening. People are not opening their eyes. They turn further in, the more the news or the events of their lives get compounded.
Well, right now there is thoughts of taking my own program off the air. And I think that it's coming from the pressure in the community who will not face me openly. As we handle events here in the community, we've talked a lot about Junipero Serra. People know where I stand. And there has been no direct attack on me except to call me a witch. And I'm sure they don't mean that kindly. However, I believe that witches were probably the wise women of the earth, and that's why the Spanish Inquisition and the Catholic Church wiped them out. However, now what's happening is I keep asking people to call in. And I say, if you have something to say in defense of Junipero Serra, if you show me proof that he was a saintly person. If you want to discuss it and your opinion is very different from mine, please do. And I throw open the phones to them. In all the time that I've been on the air, we have not had one single solitary call from that segment of the community. And I honor them, and I would like to hear from them. Instead,
but that isn't the thinking. That isn't the thinking of people who are demagogues. They don't explain or want you. Very few people come and say, I really feel something is wrong.
But I've had three, JT told me that there have been at least 3 calls after every program of people complaining about something that I'm doing on the program.
Oh, my goodness.
But they don't call me directly.
Well, we're not going to complain. We're going to take one more call, and then our time is almost up. Hello, you're on the air.
Hello, I'd like to say something possibly, as you might say, in defense of Father Serra.
Okay.
And that is this, that I'm taking it for granted that he had a missionary bent and was out to convert anybody and everybody up the coast to Christian thinking, and that was obviously the Indians and the natives of America and the California coast. That I think records show, and that it's really factual, that he had a lot to do with keeping a lot of violence and a lot of misrepresentation and a lot of things happening to the Indians. The conquistadors came up, and we look at him as being at the head of the line, right? We look at Father Serra as being the leader of these people, the mentor, and the man who makes all the decisions. And the fact is that he kept a lot of the rapes, the killings down, and when he couldn't, he went south to Mexico and sat at the Viceroy's door until he got an edict that stopped all this stuff going on, and a lot of it. And when he came back, there were Indians Native Americans kept within the walls. There were a lot of separations going on between the families.
I'm sorry, we'll have to get in touch with you because our time is up. Do you want to leave a phone number and discuss it with us?
Okay, but very quickly I want to say use your common sense. What would have happened to Junipero Serra and the church if all of their slave labor had been killed?
Yeah, so they kept some alive. Elizabeth, maybe you can get in touch with Chequeesh. Do you want to get a phone number?
I certainly do not.
Okay. Thank you for calling. Thank you very much. And that concludes the second half of World Watchers. We're going to turn on a little bit of music and then get ready for some nice jazz. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for calling.
I'll be back with you next week.